Welcome to the Catholic Midlife Podcast, where we're addressing the challenges and the opportunities of midlife from a uniquely Catholic perspective. Join us each week as we spark a midlife renewal and create a firm foundation for the next wonderful, exciting, awesome season of life.
Hello and welcome to the Catholic Midlife Podcast. It's great to be here with you. I'm Curtis. I'm here with my fellow host, Karen.
Hello, everyone. Karen
and I are married, or we were. Are we still?
We still are.
We're having a very interesting conversation.
It's been quite the day. But that's okay.
It's okay.
That's okay. Good thing we're continuing to talk about self-compassion today.
Oh, yes.
This would be an awesome skill for us on this day. And I will share what a listener messaged to me about this self-compassion series. She said, I'm listening right now to all of your self-compassion series. I really appreciate you doing this topic. It's so important. Thank you.
Oh, good.
It was very sweet.
Yeah. And this is such a transformative skill. And I'm just so glad she's getting the value out of it.
Exactly. So if you've been listening recently, we have been talking about the 3 steps of self-compassion. First one was awareness, creating awareness around our experience of difficulty. The second one was reminding ourselves that this is a moment of connection, that everyone suffers. And Curtis really spelled this out for us last week. He said, in the first step, we're really saying to ourselves, this is a moment of suffering for me. This is difficult. This is stress. This hurts, and acknowledging our situation. And the second step is really saying to ourselves, this is a part of life. Suffering is real. Everyone suffers, and I'm not alone in my suffering. This is a common experience, regardless of the external circumstances. We all understand this experience of suffering.
Oh, Karen, so I found a good quote. This is from Carl Rogers, so it's tied into these 2 steps. And it's
okay.
What he says is, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. So when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change.
I really, really like that. And I'm not sure where you found it exactly, but often we look at this self-compassion practice and we think, well, it's just being soft on myself and it's not really motivating me to change. And the research says otherwise, that this practice is very motivating and that it actually increases our chances of making real, lasting change in our life. So today, we want to talk about the third and final step of self-compassion. And we alluded to this at the end of our last episode, which is asking this really important question, what do I need right now? What do I need right now? Kristen Neff calls this the essential self-compassion question. What do I need? And it really gets me because part of what we do when we ask that question is we have to say that we're going to take our own needs seriously. We're going to value ourselves enough to ask that question and give ourselves an honest answer.
Well, and do the thing.
Yeah, and do the thing.
And do the thing.
So there's serious action in this step to show ourselves self-compassion when we know what it is we need.
And we can need a lot of different things. And I think we're going to talk about that today. There's some inward facing and some outward facing things that we can need.
Sure. There's a wide range. Before you get into that, I just want to share a quick example. And this is like a small example of how you might use this practice. And there's deeper, more powerful ways. But the one that came to mind for me was I was remembering a time a while ago when I was really having a very busy day. And I was starting to feel these health symptoms that I get sometimes with my condition. And I was getting really tired. I was not feeling well. And I had to go to this meeting in the evening and give a mini presentation. And I was starting to have this really catabolic energy around the meeting. Like, I don't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Why did I say yes? Here I am, it's 4 p.m. I'm trying to fix dinner for everybody and I feel bad. I just want to go to bed. And I use this practice and I did the first thing, right? Awareness of how I actually feel and what I'm experiencing and what I'm saying to myself. And then really understanding that, okay, this is a moment of suffering for me. And when I got to this question part, what is it I need? Like once I could ask myself that question, the answer was, it was really obvious. It was so clear to me that what I needed to do was stop fixing dinner, tell everybody to make a frozen pizza for dinner, and go take a nap before my meeting. And once I realized that, I could go do it, right? I mean, I had to obviously quiet the, oh, you should, have everybody have dinner together and sit down. You shouldn't bug out. I had to address that. But once I asked the question, I knew the choice I wanted to make or the change.
This is a good example because you were running a lot of scripts. You had a lot of these imperatives that were driving you, things that were sort of automatically creating the tension in you. Like I have to have the sit down dinner. I have to get all these things done. I have to complete my to-do list. And by going through the steps, you're able to just unplug that urgency and recognize those voices for what they were.
I think that's actually a really good point, that when you look at it from that perspective, it really helps you see the shoulds, the have tos, the need tos, and separate those out from this question, what do I need?
Yeah. So when you give this example, it seems pretty obvious. Oh, well, you just need to relax a little bit, take a nap. But it's recognizing those voices, hearing those imperatives for what they are. That's a pretty good trick.
Yeah.
And we are often operating with those things, pushing us when they don't have to be. So here's a bigger sort of example.
Oh, good. Yeah, go for it.
This is an example of somebody that was using the self-compassion over a long period of time, and it was Bill. Bill was an electrician in Chicago. He had been married for 5 years. He was very disciplined, loyal, very serious about his marriage, trying to do the right things. And he found out that his wife had been cheating on him with one of their friends.
Oh, dear.
And he had been deceived for quite a while over the situation, and their marriage spiraled out of control. They got divorced. And here it is 5 years later, and Bill is still burning with anger, and he knows he needs to just move on, but he can't. He's not even wanting to be in other relationships because of having been through all that. With the self-compassion practice, he asked himself over time, what is it I really need here? And it turned out that he had some unmet needs, and what he needed was respect. He had lost respect by having his wife cheat on him and deceive him. And he wasn't getting the respect from her. They weren't in touch. He wasn't getting it from other sources as well. He had to use the self-compassion and understand why he deserved the respect and to show himself some respect. As funny as that sounds, it was very profound for Bill. And as he was able to do that, something interesting happened. He was able to see his ex-wife's actions in a different light, and understanding that she had kind of some of her own things going on. And he was just able to have a greater perspective over it. It's because he was working through the self-compassion practice.
Right. So this, I just have a couple thoughts as you were talking. One is this step, what do I need? Then has this action, like we said, where you're giving yourself what you need. And you kind of indicated that, like, this guy realized he had to give himself what he needed. And that can be a little counterintuitive. We can tend to look outside of ourselves for respect, for validation, for comfort, for love, for forgiveness.
Yeah, those are the things we expect other people to give us so we can
Right.
feel good about ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so shifting our mindset a little bit to realize, well, actually, I have the resources in myself to give this to myself when I need it. Even something as ambiguous as respect, which is very deep. And the other thing I was thinking of was, he could have looked at his situation in this very more of a narrow perspective, like, well, it's all about forgiveness. It's all about, I have to forgive this person and find this, I don't know, generosity or mercy or something in me. But it was in doing that practice and finding that unmet need and meeting that unmet need, that's actually what shifted and allowed him to change his response.
And that's what helped him have forgiveness or some degree of it over time.
Exactly. So I feel like that's really an interesting approach when we're in those situations where we're struggling to forgive somebody and wondering what we can do to move ourselves forward.
Karen, you shared that you needed a nap.
I did. Boy, did I ever need one.
Yeah, you had to pause and sort of break the cycle and figure out what do I need now?
Yeah.
And then Bill, his answer to the question boiled down to he needed respect. So what kinds of answers do people come up with when they ask themselves this question, what do I need now?
Right. So like there's probably a pretty wide variety, right? Yeah. So in the self-compassion research, they tend to kind of put things in two buckets. I think you alluded to this a little earlier, but there's kind of that inward focus bucket. So sometimes people are like, I need some comforting. I need some soothing. I need to feel validated. And sometimes that's, a physical thing people need. Sometimes it's, I need to hear certain words and I'm not hearing them. I'm full of these other things in my brain. Sometimes people just need to feel connected or what have you. There's a lot of things that we might need sort of inward focused. But the other bucket is more outward focused. Like sometimes I need to set a boundary. Sometimes I need to take action. Sometimes I need to have a difficult conversation or enter into some conflict. And so here's something interesting. As I've been practicing self-compassion, I feel like, we each have these little cues that might tell us, ding, 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 this might be a moment for self-compassion.
Funny because you have all this knowledge, but all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm not practicing self-compassion.
Exactly.
This is like, there should be a big alarms going off, but you're just oblivious to it.
I know. But here's something I have learned is when I'm avoiding something, when I start to notice that I'm avoiding something, just for me, that's a cue that I need to do some self-compassion because there's something that is probably a little difficult for me that I'm not facing or appreciating or taking action in. So for me, avoidance is kind of a cue, like do the self-compassion.
Yeah, it's interesting you've learned to recognize the sign.
Exactly.
Now, I know that ruminating is a big sign. It's a big flag for me.
Right.
So when I catch myself, it's time to do some self-compassion, for instance.
Yeah.
But more recently, I've realized that sometimes my inner critic shows up. just emotionally. Like I have these sort of emotional blocks. I'm not having the rumination, and I'm realizing, oh, I'm not taking action because I've got this, I'm not ready. And
Right.
actually it's not so obvious to me, but that's a time where self-compassion practice helps me because I can have the emotion. I can hear and say what's needed so that I can get to this question of what do I need now?
Yes. Yes. And this is actually making me think of a client who started really using self-compassion pretty aggressively when she noticed she was starting to be critical with her family. So like that was her cue. When I start getting critical of other people, that means there's something that is going on inside me and I need to do some self-compassion. So I thought that was pretty interesting too.
Yeah, that goes back to the idea of once you hit your inner limits,
Yes.
then you run out of resources for the people around you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So there's a lot of ways that an individual, I think, might want to be soothed or comforted or validated. And there's could be a lot of different circumstances where there's different kinds of action or boundaries that need to happen. I know this sort of outward looking self-compassion bucket, that kind of the word for that in the literature today is fierce self-compassion, having fierce self-compassion. So this is for any moms out there, this is when your mama bear comes out for yourself as well as those you love. And I think we have a lot of experiences of the mama bear on behalf of the kid, but we don't always appreciate that it can often be appropriate on our own behalf.
Well, with the ladies in particular, there can be discomfort with anger. It's just something that we see. It could be cultural.
Yeah. Yeah.
And engaging that anger constructively on your own behalf, that's very important.
Yes, exactly. So there is this sort of fiercer, protective kind of self-compassion. And that's just as much self-compassion as the soothing or comforting or validating kind of self-compassion. And ultimately, there's probably going to be pieces of both in what we need, depending on the circumstance.
I've found that it's easy to sort of gut this practice, just skip straight to what do I need now? And one of my thoughts for that is I'm upset and I'm thinking, I need a solution, not a process. I need to get an answer. I have to get this thing done or whatever it is. And I'm skipping through the practice and I'm not really doing it. So it's important to have the conversation with yourself, to pause. It's a self-compassion break.
Right. Right.
and like your example, you had to cut or clip off those scripts, those imperatives that were bossing you around so you could get to the bottom of what do I need now?
Right. Right. So the way what you're saying is I could do this and say I'm doing it, but really I'm just back to I'm going to fix the problem approach.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So it is subtle.
Yeah.
And in all of this, the big thing here is if you ask yourself what you need, you have to be ready to value your own need.
Yes. Yes. And so here's the way I think of that. Like we can have this circle of compassion in our lives. And there's a lot of people, right, in that circle of compassion. People we know, people we love, people we really feel for, people who are suffering. And we really wish that we could alleviate their suffering. We could do something to make it easier for them. So we have all this compassion, and part of this is we have to put ourselves in our own circle of compassion. We have to put ourselves in the mix as someone who is worthy of compassion from ourselves as well as from other people.
The universe is not running out of compassion.
Right.
God is not short on compassion.
Yes.
If you use some self-compassion, you're not cheating anybody out of theirs. And even if others have bigger problems than we do, doesn't mean that we don't deserve compassion as well, because we all do. God made each of us. And for us to have that compassion for ourselves is so important.
Yes. So here's just a little summary for our listeners of the steps of self-compassion. Number 1, creating the awareness of your experience and your suffering. Number 2, connecting your own suffering to really the human experience of life and what it means to be a human person on this earth. And what we talked about today, asking yourself the question, what do I need right now? And being ready to do some kind of action to show yourself compassion.
Karen, thanks for wrapping it up. And it is great to be here with everybody. If you are thinking about coaching, you should pop over to our website, thecatholicmidlife.com. Hit the big orange button and you can arrange a conversation with us, and we'll see what makes sense for you in the coaching arena. Thanks again for being here with us, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to the Catholic Midlife podcast. It's great to be here with you. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite app or platform. Leave a review. That's so helpful so that others like you can find the podcast. And be sure to tell your friends. We'll see you next week.